Welcome in, folks, for another episode of What's Bruin. I am your host, Chris Dozick, joined again by the wonderful Gayle Troiani. Gayle, are you excited to talk some bees tonight?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like we've been too much time in between the last podcast.
I know, it's like so much has happened, and yet it seems like it's going by so slow.
Yeah.
So we have so much to go over. And I know today's our pre-draft special, quote unquote, if you will. So we'll have a lot on that. But out of seemingly nowhere, we had a nice little press conference today. We got some new jerseys. We have an extension for one of our RFAs in place. Let's work our way backwards. What do you say?
Okay.
Start with today's press conference.
Sure.
What were your major takeaways from today's press conference? Let's just start with that.
I think one of the things is that they haven't reached the deal with Morgan Geekie yet, right? And he made the comment, if you want to pull up that quote, because I know you clipped it already, where he said there's constant communication, but he doesn't think that they're on the doorstep. Now, I don't think it's going to get as far as what it did with Jeremy Swayman last year. But I am a little nervous that they haven't been able to come to a deal yet. So I don't know what's holding it up.
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because the quote that stood out to me is the first part of the second paragraph, where he says arbitration is impossible for both sides. Like,
right.
That tells me neither side wants to deal with arbitration. Geekie's side knows that an arbitration hearing may not be as favorable for them as they would hope. And there was one other line in there where he mentioned right here, whether it's 1 year or much, much longer. So, and it says, we're going to find a deal at the end of the day. I think both sides are okay with where they're at on a 1-year deal. I think they both sides have a default at a 1-year deal for a certain dollar amount where they go, we're not going to arbitration. We will fall back to this and kick the can down the road.
Right.
They're trying to hammer out whether they want to do a 6, 7, 8-year deal, and what does that look like. And that's why I think you don't throw both options out there and say, you know, we can do a 1-year deal, but we're looking for longer. Like,
right.
Duh. Why else would they be in constant communication as well? Because they're trying to gauge what other RFAs are getting out there. You know, he's not Maverick Bourque. That deal doesn't help him all that much. But also, you're not seeing guys like Noah Dobson sign, Evan Bouchard sign. Like, those guys aren't getting their extensions right now either. So,
right. You know, and I didn't put the quote out there. It was another quote. It was right after that. He said that the problem is that it's a vague response because, again, Sweeney does not talk details, right?
Right.
He never talks details. He doesn't ever want to put a player in that position and whatnot. But he said that when you're looking at the market, I have to find it. Hold on, let me find the quote. RFAs treat their restricted free agency the same way unrestricted free agents do. The only difference is that they're not listening to multiple teams. They're listening to one team, right?
Right.
But they're basically doing the same thing. And in the RFA market, they're trying to find the highest comp. You know what I mean? So Morgan Geekie, though he's a restricted free agent, he's still looking at what other RFAs are getting offers for. You know,
right.
Because they may not be setting the market per se, but they are setting up their future for, you know what I mean, for their final restricted free agent deal before they can go test the market. So that's part of it. You have to remember is that, does he want, a 1-year deal? Okay, you get a 1-year deal and then it gives you all season long to get a deal done. But is it better? Do you want him for 4 years? Do you want him for 5 years? Do you want him for 6 years?
Right. Signing the 1-year deal.
He's got, you know what I mean? He has the rights to go test whatever he wants to test.
Right. And signing the 1-year deal changes the equation for the next contract completely. So it's nice to say, oh, we got a 1-year deal in place and then go figure out more. It's nice to say that, but what does it solve for you in the long term? It's a Band-Aid that doesn't solve much of anything.
Right.
And, you know, when you look at Geekie in general, first of all, he's got the same agent as, you know, Connor McDavid, Zach Werenski, Austin Matthews. So, like, it's not like this agent doesn't know what he's doing, but Geekie will be an unrestricted free agent after this contract, no matter what, even if it's a 1-year deal. So, like, do you really want to do a 1-year deal that walks Morgan Geekie to free agency after potentially back-to-back 30-goal seasons?
Well, I think part of it is that, and I think that's where they're having that hiccup, is because he had those back-to-back improved seasons, right? Yes, he's earned more, but again, it's still a small sample size.
Yep.
So,
but the question is,
where fans are just like, give him anything he wants, Sweeney cannot look at it that way.
There's risk, no matter. I mean, obviously, there's always risk, but like, we're not talking about, oh, he could go out and, you know, have someone slash his ankle and now he's out for the entire season because he's got a broken ankle. There's a risk for that for literally everybody.
Right.
There's risk in getting it wrong, you know, and
there's risk. What if something happens to David Pastrnak? Does he perform without Pastrnak? You know what I mean? So there's that risk as well, because he wasn't performing without David Pastrnak. You know what I mean? Yes, he did 2 years ago. He started to, but again, it was a different situation. But when he was partnered with Marchand at the beginning of the year, they all were getting off to a slow start. So, you know, he plays better with Pastrnak. And then you also have to keep in mind that you're going to 100% have a more healthy Lindholm, which we talk about this ad nauseum. You know what I mean? Having that healthy Lindholm, how much does that affect his point production?
Yeah, and for some reason, the chat on YouTube is disabled. I think the setting got switched back, so I just discovered that. So, you know, if you want to make some comments, definitely want to hear them. You can check them out. Check us out on Twitter as well, and those comments will show up. You can follow myself, Dom's Twitter. I know I retweeted the link out there, so we'll have options for the comments. Just for some reason, YouTube is not being one of them right now. Give me 1 second here. Anyway, sorry, my phone started going off.
No worries.
And so that's where we got to put. Gotta love doing shows live, right? So I don't even. Anyway, there's the risk.
Right.
And also, he's still a valuable trade chip. So
yeah,
I'm not looking to move him.
Yeah,
I'm not looking to move him.
I don't think the Bruins are looking to move him either. I really don't. I think that, if anything, if they move anyone, it's going to be more of the prospect way than it will be a proven NHLer. Up front, anyways, unless it's a bottom 6 guy. I don't see them trading one of the top guys. They're already missing secondary scoring. They're not going to trade away. But I could be wrong. I mean, stranger things have happened, right?
Yeah. I don't see the names that I see being moved from the NHL roster are a Zacha, a Middlestead. If you want to throw like a Hustadinov in that list as well, you know, you're not move. You know, I will include Korpisalo's name on that list, although I don't think that's going to be done at all. It's just there's no move that makes sense where DiPietro is not an NHL goaltender. I don't care how good his numbers are in the American Hockey League. You can look at his numbers all you want. The goals he gives up, even in Providence, are not goals that an NHL goaltender can allow. If he comes up for 30 games, you will go at best 10 and 20 in his games, because the goals that he's giving up are on an AHL caliber shots, and he's not facing the NHL caliber shots that he would see in those 30 games. You also cannot rely on him to be a starter should Swayman go down.
Well, and I think that, in all honesty, and I hate to keep throwing fans under the bus, but all they see is Korpisalo's price tag.
Right.
And they want to move the money. They don't want to necessarily move the body. And again, last year, I don't think we definitely didn't see the best Swayman had to offer. And I don't think we saw the best Korpisalo had to offer. I think at times he was absolutely brilliant and played much better than Swayman did. And I think that had they split the workload a little bit more, given the fact that Swayman did not have a camp, and and when he started to falter, instead of trying to get him out of, they should have gone to Korpisalo more. But then again, that's why I'm not Joe Sacco, and that's why I'm not the coach of the Bruins. But I think that you're gonna see a goaltending tandem next season that we're used to seeing as media, as fans, as is Korpisalo and Swayman going to put up exactly what Swayman and Allmark put up? Probably not, but I would say definitely closer to it, because I think given the fact how Swayman played in Worlds, given the fact that Swayman is 100% focused on proving everyone wrong about that. People are saying that the Bruins overpaid him and that they kept the wrong goaltender. I don't care what anyone says. He may not have a chip on his shoulder when he talks to certain people, but he definitely, he's one of those goaltenders that's like, you want to cut me down? I'm going to prove you wrong. And I 100% think that we're going to see a much better tandem, and you're going to have a much better defense in front of them as well, which we've talked about again at length,
Right. And I think some of this is them admitting that they could have handled the goaltending situation different last year. And so you're not going to just give up on Korpisalo after 1 year, because there was enough there. Right. And like you said, fans are just seeing the $3 million AAV and going, oh, well, that's too much. You can save there. You can, but you're not going to get the same quality. And again, Michael DiPietro.
And the other thing is, too, is even Sweeney said at the end of season press conference that he wishes that they examined the workload. And not that Swayman complained about the workload, and not that Swayman couldn't handle the workload. Swayman could 100%, and going forward, he can handle that workload. The problem is that missing camp and having all those distractions, which I don't care, when you don't go to camp and you're only getting shot at by college, players versus NHL.
Oh, it's different.
It's 100% different. He missed camp. He missed preseason. He signed the day before opening night and was on the roster and on the bench, but he should have been your opening night goaltender.
Oh, 100%. It just, it is what it is. And when it comes to DiPietro, right? Yes, he is a very, very solid AHL goaltender, and that's fine. And, if you call him up for an emergency backup role because Swayman goes down, fine. If he gets 3 starts because he's supplementing Korpisalo some time off because Swayman went down for a month, also fine. Mm-hmm. His career will fall somewhere between Dustin Tokarski and Keith Kincaid. Now, he's young enough. He's 26 years old, I think?
Yeah.
26. So he's young enough. he may have an Anton Hudobin-like run in him somewhere along the way in his career, but you're talking about goaltenders who barely crack 200 NHL starts in their entire career. In some cases, not even 150. And yes, they'll play hockey until they're 35, 36, 37 years old. But we're not even talking about
the reps.
Yeah, and we're not even talking about a Jake Allen guy here. Like right now, if he were to be an NHL backup, he would be surpassed by Anton Forsberg as quality in net. So he is by far not the guy. And quite frankly, that with the possibilities of what this kid from Czechia that they signed in the AHL can do, I wouldn't be surprised if neither Bussy or DiPietro returned.
Right.
I just wouldn't be surprised. I would bring back DiPietro just so you have him as a veteran presence in the AHL, one, for that call-up, and two, for this kid from Czechia. But I'm okay if he's not. There are plenty of AHL goaltenders that you can go out and get who fit the same bill. You know, Kokkinen just went to the Calder Cup for Florida. He was their third goaltender. I'd be fine bringing him in that same role. He's the same type of thing that we're looking at DiPietro. He's better at it, though. So, you know, he's got a little more AHL time or NHL time under his belt.
Right.
So DiPietro's not the answer. Svedbak is not the answer. Bussy's not the answer. They have issues in goal, but Korpisalo and Swayman are not that.
Right.
So
and it's not like Bob Asensio is not coming back either. You still have goalie Bob. You know, a second year with goalie Bob for Korpisalo is just going to make him even stronger. So
yeah. But they will be wearing new sweaters.
Yes.
So
what's old is new again.
Do you want to start with the white ones or the black ones?
Oh, I don't care. You pick. Right. I'll let you pick.
What do you think of the white?
The only thing I don't like is the bottom black. You know, like that big chunk of black. I love how clean they look. I love the old school spoked B. You can't really see the Bruins bear on the shoulder, and the white away uniforms, I believe, say Boston, and the home jerseys say Bruins on the bear. But I love the new sweaters. I 100% love them.
And we have the black ones here to show as well.
Yeah.
I think they look sharp.
Yeah, I just wish, in all honesty, I really wish that they didn't do the black on the bottom of the white. That's the only thing. Do you know what I mean? Like that chunk of black. Because it looks nice on the black sweaters, but I think on the white, and I keep calling them sweaters because I'm old school.
I know what you mean.
But I really, and also too, I like how, go back to the white. I like how the home jersey and the away jersey, the spoke B is just a little bit different. That, you know, the away jersey has the gold 8 spokes with the black ring. And if you go to the home jersey, it's the black spokes with the gold ring. So I like how they offset those. And so the shoulders, the Bruins will be on the home jersey and the Boston will be on the road jersey. So on that bear on the shoulder, it's going to say Boston on the away jersey, and on the home jersey, it'll say Bruins.
I know they're getting compared very much to the anniversary jerseys that they did. They're just less sparkly. I like how they simplified the stripes on the sleeves. That always bothered me with those jerseys because they looked so much busier.
Yeah.
This is, I think, what they should have done for that.
This is basically going back to the late 80s, early 90s, with just a little bit of a tweak. This is like, if you saw the video that they put out, this is so close to the jersey that Cam Neely wore and what Don Sweeney wore, you know? Yeah. So you look at those jerseys, and I gotta say, I gotta give them props for getting. I know that Michael J. Fox and Cam Neely are really close and whatever. I'm so glad they got him to do that video. I think it was cool. I know some people thought it was cheesy. I like the fact that they made McAvoy look like Biff, you know. So I really think that they did a good job putting that together and unveiling it the way they unveiled it with, the showing the clip of the beginning of Neely's retirement ceremony, So I think it was well done. I think the sweaters look clean, they look nice. Again, my only gripe is that black chunk on the away jersey. That's it. Because I think the sleeves should just be like, I think they would look better all white. I don't know why they did the black like that. I'm like, where did that come from?
It just doesn't. I agree. I think that's probably the biggest gripe that I have with it too. I will say the little commercial thing that they did for it, everything I really liked about it. I just wish, and because none of the pictures really show the full side patch or like it focuses on the front, and I get it. That's the premise
Right.
of the entire thing. But they had an opportunity with the commercial where they could have showed the front and the back, and they could have shown a little bit more of the sleeves and stuff like that. But again, is it the end of the world? No. I'm not going to sit here and complain about a 30-second commercial or whatever it was. That overall was done very well.
No, and
So,
the other thing is too is that the rim of the jersey, the bottom rim, the very bottom, it's gonna say, if you pull up one of the jerseys again, I don't care which one. Actually go to the other one because you can't really see it. But you see the back corner on the back of the jersey, there's like a little black spot right near the tie down straps.
oh yeah.
That's gonna say Boston Bruins.
Okay.
Yeah,
You know,
that was
any of
one
the
of
authentic ones, they're going to be like $900 to include that little writing.
no, that's part of it. It's called the wood mark.
So, but overall, no minimal complaints, and let's be honest, there anything they put out, we were going to be able to find something wrong with it.
Yeah.
So, if it's just the little black ending on the sleeves on one jersey, like, okay. Now, do you take anything from the fact that both McAvoy and Pastrnak were both still wearing the A in the promo picture that we showed?
No, because I don't think that they're not gonna, even if they have in mind who the captain's gonna be, they're not gonna do that until training camp. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, they're not with a new head coach, not with, a new roster that's coming in. They gotta wait and see, who steps up, whether it's Lindholm, as in Hampus with Zador, like who gets the other A. There's so many different factors. Sturm, I know that he's talked to some of the players, like he's mentioned that he's talked to players, but he's got to see them on the ice to see who's going to earn the captaincy, and they don't necessarily have to start the season with a captain. They could start with 3 A's and move on from there, or they could find that they have someone step up in time. So it doesn't bother me. I know people are like, oh, why they both have the A? Why do they both have the A? Because no one's been named captain yet.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it's more of a media and fan driven conversation than anything. And I think I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure if you stick with all A's, you can have four.
Yeah.
And so I really wouldn't be surprised if they have four A's, two on offense,
Well,
two on defense.
so the other thing is too is that even when Chara was captain, I think it was his last 2 seasons, Bergeron was always one of the alternates, right?
Yep.
But then Krejci had away games and Marchand had home games. You know what I
Right.
mean? And then when Bergeron became captain, Marchand took the A, and then it was Krejci and I forget who else had the other A. And again, it was home and away. And it was home and away for the first half of the season, then they flipped it home and away for the second half of the season. So there's nothing written in stone. Like anyone can wear anyone. It's like your captain is your captain. But anyway, because you saw it last year, like when Marchand was injured, Coyle wore an A. You know what I mean? So I don't think that matters. I think what matters is if you have a captain, you have a captain. But as far as any player can wear an A.
Right. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if they had like Pastrnak and McAvoy as a consistent A, both home and road. And then, you saw like, you could see Geekie and Lindholm alternate the other one on the front end. You could see Lindholm and Zadorov alternate the one on the back end. Like, there's so many different ways. And you also haven't finished bringing everybody in.
Right.
So, like, why are you going to name, why are you going to name Hampus Lindholm an alternate or even or even the captain, and then all of a sudden you get a deal that you can't pass up on and you have to move him?
Right.
Like, again, I don't think you're moving Hampus Lindholm, but at the same time, how often are we hearing everything is on the table?
Right. Well, I mean, that's the thing with this team heading into you're just now really getting into the off season. I mean, yeah, you're in the off season, but you're really getting into the off season. The draft is Friday, and right after the draft, Tuesday is free agency. Like, people forget how quick the draft is Friday and Saturday. Free agency is Tuesday. Like, there's no time for sleep in between.
Right. And the good news is you have no more coaching vacancies open. You have found your power play guy.
Right.
Thoughts on Steve Spott being brought in by Marco Sturm? Because everything that my understanding is, this was a Sturm hire, not a front office hire. Obviously, they were all involved in the process. But when he said, this is the guy that I want, they obviously had to sign off on it. But what do you think of him coming in as the new?
Listen, if it's going to help if it's going to give the power play a lift and not have it be the same thing that we've seen for the past 6 years with just rotating person. I mean, let's be realistic. What's different about the power play? Nothing.
Personnel.
Nothing is different. It is just personnel. And some personnel works and some personnel doesn't. So if they can fix the power play and find out why it's had such a power outage, I'm 100% for it. I think that him and Kelly working together is going to be a godsend, because Chris Kelly was such a phenomenal penalty killer, but Spot drives such a good power. You know what I mean? Like, I think that they're going to be able to complement each other. And last year, when the penalty kill faltered and then it started to get better for a while and then it faltered again after that, when it started to get better in the middle of it, it's because Chris Kelly took over the penalty kill. Now, and I know that they say that your power play coaches are your best penalty killers because they know where to be to kill penalties, so they know. But there's also the offensive aspect of it that I think, as much as I love Chris Kelly, he didn't really have that. It's not like you have Patrice Bergeron running your power play as a top penalty killer. You know what I mean?
Right. Chris Kelly was never putting up 50 points in a season.
And he was never on the power play. So even though he was on the penalty kill of it, he never really knew the offensive side of it. So I think there is a difference there.
No, I think the two of them working together, because Chris Kelly has proven that he can work with other coaches anyway.
Oh, 100%.
I think that'll be a real solid pairing to work on that. I don't think there was anything majorly wrong with your coaching staff. And I think Sturm knows where to delegate.
And I don't think that Jay Leach, I don't think who they kept, keeping Jay Leach, keeping Chris Kelly, obviously no one wants to see goalie Bob go anywhere. I don't think that those were mistakes. Bringing in a coach to complement them, that's 100% awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think they're not changing the whole entire coaching staff. but they tweaked it just enough that I think that when you have Sturm, who could play all 3 zones when he was a player, you have your assistant coaches that complement him in those areas, and you have the best goaltending coach in the league. You know what I mean? I just think that staff-wise, they're in a good position. They just have to finish the roster.
Yep. And you know what? I think they're on their way to do that. Obviously, you can't sign free agents who aren't free agents yet because that doesn't happen until July 1. So, we have to get to that point. Bob asks, who are we drafting Friday night? We will get to that because the draft is coming up as well. Do you want to discuss the development camp roster first or Mason Lohrei's perfect extension first?
Why don't we go with Lohrei? Because then we can go into development camp and then right into the draft.
Sounds good to me. Mason Lohrei obviously extended 2 years, average annual value of $3.2 million, so 6.4 in total. He will still be an RFA when this season is over. Literally the perfect contract.
Huh?
Literally the perfect contract.
Right. Well, you said when the season's over. When the
contract is over.
Right.
Thank you. But literally the perfect contract.
I 100% agree. I think that there's so much upside to his game.
Mm-hmm.
And he was thrown to the wolves last year.
Yep.
And you saw the mistakes, but he never. That's one of the things that Neely, and people love to throw this quote in Neely's face. Are you outplaying your mistakes? Right? That's what Neely said about the prospects. Are you outplaying your mistakes? So Lohrei had no choice.
People latched onto that like a piranha.
Right. But Lohrei had no choice. With McAvoy down, with Lindholm down, then with Carlo being traded away, he had no choice.
He was literally your number 1 defenseman, or would you consider it Nikita Zadorov?
I would have considered. I would have put Zadorov just because the amount of minutes and playing in different the veteran leadership. I would have put Zadorov as the number 1.
That's fine. I'm not going to argue with that. That's probably where I would land on it too. But at the same time, you're still talking about them. If you take the handedness out of it, they're your 1-2.
Yeah.
Nikita Zadorov, who's brand new to the organization, and Mason Lohrei, who's 24 years old and has only been playing the position for 8 years.
And then your third best defenseman last season was Andrew Peeke.
Right, which I love Andrew Peeke. I love everything he brings, but you want him on your third pair.
Right. But last year was different. Last year was different. So I think that what they did was they basically said, listen, we know you're here. You can get here. But let's get these 2 years and let's get you working to where you're not having to be in, the spotlight, so to speak, because you have McAvoy, you have Hampus, you have Zadorov. You know what I mean? Because he made the decisions to jump into plays, which is what he's always done and which is what the Bruins want him to do. But the other thing is that the mistakes that he made, every player on the Bruins was making. It just exemplified because he was on the blue line. You know what I mean? It's just like when people say, well, David Pastrnak had, however many turnovers. Well, because when the puck is on your stick that much, you're gonna have, and the same thing happened to Lohrei. If he was playing with McAvoy, with Lindholm, with Carlo, it wouldn't have been as bad. First of all, he wouldn't have had the minutes that he had. He would. I agree, Bob. I would rather him be on the top power play unit than McAvoy with Lindholm if they're gonna go with 2 defensemen. Because if not, it has to be Lindholm on that top power play unit.
I was going to say, I would want to start with Hampus.
It has to be. But if you're going to go with 2 defensemen, if that's what they decide to do, to go with 2 defensemen instead of 4 forwards on the power play unit, then I'm fine with it being Hampus and Lohrei on that first unit and McAvoy on the second unit with 4 forwards.
I think if Hampus is on your first power play unit, though, you go 4 forwards and a defenseman. I think if you're relying on Lohrei as your power play quarterback, you're going 3 and 2.
Yeah. But I don't think that, because I think if you have Hampus on your first one, on your top, he's your quarterback, right?
Yes.
And if you're going to use McAvoy on the power play, whether it be the top unit or the second unit, whether you flip them or flop them, whatever, he's your quarterback. So I'm not opposed to Lohrei being that fourth forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I would rather him be out there with Lindholm than with McAvoy. I would rather see McAvoy out there with the 4 forwards versus Lohrei and Lindholm, because I think that Hampus can control the blue line and Lohrei can definitely pinch down further.
Yeah, I mean, also, we don't know what Steve Spott's going to want to do. Maybe
Right.
he only wants to run 3 and 2. Maybe
Right.
he only wants to run 4 and 1. So
Do you remember when Julien used to do that?
Do the 3-2?
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
literally, it was literally a top line and 2 defensemen. Like, he never had that power play 4-1. You know what I mean? He always had that 3-2. And
you
even
might
Cassidy did it for a while where it was 3-2.
And you might have a guy like, because we also haven't had a chance to talk about this move, but you trade Ryan Mast and a 6th-round pick. You bring in Victor Soderstrom, who's a former first-round pick, 11th overall, has NHL experience. This guy very easily could make your third pair out of camp.
Right.
Decent two-way guy, plays, I'm not going to say he's Charlie McAvoy, but he plays in a similar way where he can carry the puck, he can dump the puck in, he can, make that first breakout pass, but he's also a solid defender. So, like, your hope is he's your third guy on the right side.
I think part of it, though,
even your
is
second.
I think whenever they bring someone new in, though, especially now, so things are like, you got to figure out, it's going to be a little different this year. What type of system is Marco Sturm going to run?
Right. But
you know what I mean?
During his time in Arizona, Soderstrom played 16 minutes a night. So he can be a second pairing guy. You just have to figure out how it's going to be done.
But what I'm talking about, though, is that usually when the Bruins get a new player in, before they throw them on the power play, especially the power play, they want them to learn the regular system, right?
Mm-hmm.
But things are different this year because everyone's going to be learning the system at the same time. Because even Sturm and Sweeney talked about it in the press conference, that are they okay with it saying status quo? No, they're gonna mix things up. Now, of course, there's still a defensive team first. They're always going to be a defensive. Like we talked about this too. The Bruins are built from the back end out. They're built from goaltending to defense, then forwards, because they want to be hard to play against so that they can win those 1-goal games, those 2-goal games. You know what I mean? So I think that's the thing, that once we know what type of coach Sturm wants to be with the roster that he has, we may not even, you're not even going to know what your offensive lines are going to look like, because again, RFAs, UFAs, and now you have got Sturm. So maybe Sturm's system, maybe Pasternak works better with Zucker and Geekie instead of Lindholm. Maybe Lindholm,
right now
you know what I mean? Like, we just don't.
Your active roster is 15 players right now. You get up to 23 if you can fit them under the cap, and you skate, what is it, 20 a night?
Right.
So, like, you're 5 players shy of a lineup.
Right.
Like, that sounds insulting. That person's 5 players shy of a lineup. Like,
yeah,
okay, you're an entire starting lineup short.
Yeah.
So minus the goalie, but there's still a lot to be done. I know we talked about the moves that they've already made, and then development camp. The roster for camp has been announced.
Well, it's a tentative roster. It's not a full roster.
Right. I don't expect anyone who's on here to not be there, barring like major injury, I guess.
Right. Right.
And even then, I would expect most of them to be there in terms of off-ice activities, at least.
Right.
So real quick, I'll just read them off because unfortunately I don't have a graphic for it. But Dalton Bancroft, who's the guy they signed out of college last season. Andre Gasso, Beckett Hendrickson, Dean Letourneau, Brett Link, who's a camp invitee, Jonathan Morello, Logan Morell, another camp invite, Casper Nason, Chris Pelosi, Ryan Walsh. I believe he will be restricted to off-ice only.
He is.
Ethan Whitcomb, who is a camp invite, Will Zellers, who they acquired last year in trade. And then on defense, Jackson Edwards, CJ Foley is a camp invite. Ty Gallagher, Elliot Groenwald, Loke Johansson, Christian Kostadinsky, Ben Robertson is a camp invite, and then Philip Svedback, and then camp invites of Cameron Corpy and Albin Boya for goaltending. I love the fact that they're bringing in Boya from UMaine. I think this is going to be a great opportunity to build that relationship to try to get him in a Bruins sweater after this NCAA season. Because you need that help in goal.
Right.
As of right now, I'm not giving Svedback a contract when his season is over. We have to see how Providence College does this year to really determine that, how he does. But, I mean, you can't go wrong with that group of goaltending.
Right.
Anyone on the roster in particular that you're looking at during the camp?
For me, I want to see Letourneau. Because I think one of the things that even Sweeney thought that it was a mistake that Letourneau went to play in college this year. At least that's what he said today. Let me find the exact quote.
I just wanted to be clear, though, that is said with pure hindsight. Right. That's one of those things where it's only a mistake if you let it become one. Like you said, let's see how Dean Letourneau does this year because we don't know exactly how much he feels he learned.
Right.
And so we'll have to see how he does at camp. This is the year that we said for an entire year, especially those of us who watched me and Dom do the prospects all last year. This year is going to establish Dean Letourneau's actual NCAA baseline.
Right. Okay. So here's the quote. Significant growing pains, making a very big jump from the level of hockey he was the year before to the demands of college. There's a little uniqueness there with Will Smith leaving early to go to the NHL. We talked a little bit about what it would be, what would be best in terms of Dean. And in hindsight, I think we would have agreed that maybe another year of USHL, a full year of the USHL would have been the best path. Physically, he was able to play at the college level. And again, that opportunity presented itself in a unique fashion. I think everyone was sort of with the understanding that physically he was ready to do it. Now, whether or not you can carry that over in the highest level, because that's what the expectations are at Boston College, and be successful from a point production standpoint, that's a leap. Deep down, is he better for it? Well, we'll see this year because I think that he's been tested mentally and physically, and he's putting in the work now that he has an understanding of how much work it requires to play at that level and be successful. That's not necessarily a negative. It's just that when players have had this success and put up the points their entire careers, and all of a sudden they're like, hold on, this is a little bit harder, it's deflating to a degree. But talking through it with him, he'll be fine. He'll earn his opportunity, work his way up the depth chart, and start to produce like he has. So I don't look at it as a setback. I just look at it as a really, like a reality slap in a lot of ways. So it's the same thing so we talk about Letourneau, right? He's gonna be fine. making that jump. It's just like we said, if Poitras was older, he never would have been playing in the NHL that first season. He would have been in Providence.
Yep.
And he was only in the NHL because they could not they either had to send him to juniors or keep him on the NHL roster.
And that extra year of juniors was not going to be as beneficial.
Correct.
Development-wise.
That's the difference. Letourneau now has the opportunity, development-wise, to succeed at Boston College.
Right.
He got, like Sweeney said, he kind of got thrown to the wolves because Smith left early. You know what I mean?
He also wasn't being put in position. You mentioned the depth chart. He was third line center, fourth line center minutes. He was getting 6-7 minutes a night. I think the max he ever played in one night was like 9 or 11 minutes. He was not on the power play unit, first or second, and he was not killing penalties. So, like, he was getting runt minutes.
Right.
That's not what he's going to give the Boston club should he make it that high. So, like you said, it's a reality slap of, oh shit, this is actually harder than plowing through. I'm 6'4", plowing through 5'9" prep high school kids, literally a man among children. Like,
but that's one of the things that we talk about when the Bruins take a prospect and keep them. And I know fans want all their prospects to be in the NHL or they're not successful. But if they're, like you said, if they're getting runt minutes, what purpose is it for them to be playing in the NHL when they can be playing in all three situations or all situations, power play, penalty kill, getting top line minutes, second line minutes, getting their production, than playing runt minutes or being a healthy scratch, or all of a sudden the game's 1-1 in the third period and you're not seeing ice time because you want David Pastrnak out there. You know what I mean?
I know you know this, but I want to reveal this little secret. That's why Matthew Poitras was never called up when Mark Kastelic was hurt. That's why you saw Patrick Brown.
Right.
Because those runt minutes are for a Patrick Brown player, not Matthew Poitras.
Right.
It's the same concept. Mm-hmm. So, I'm excited to see what Letourneau brings to this second camp. It's not the whirlwind rush from Vegas 3 days later to being on the ice in Boston. There's quite a few people that I'm looking forward to seeing. But I really want to see, specifically for how they're used, Jackson Edward and Ty Gallagher. Jackson Edward is a left shot defenseman who's played the majority of his career on the right side. And right now, your right side in Providence, if you want to consider Soderstrom in that depth chart, you can. But with him, you also have Billy Sweezy signed, Ian Mitchell, who's an RFA, Drew Bavaro, who I don't think they'll be bringing back, who'll be hitting RFA status, and Ty Gallagher for an AHL contract for next year. Mm-hmm. So where does Jackson Edward fit in? You have more openings on the left side. That would make sense, but he plays the right. So how did they work that? And then Gallagher, because who do they pair him with? Right. I'd love to see him with Loke Johansson. I think those two could be an amazing AHL pair together. There's no way Johansson is not going to Providence next year. Like, that's where you want to see him. Do they pair those two together? Could you see Jackson Edward on the left side and maybe in the future get paired with a guy like Soderstrom? Because Edward would realistically be a third pairing guy. I think Edward would also be kind of looked at as your Nikita Zadorov replacement. When Zadorov's contract is winding down, you're looking at how Edward can fill that role if you want to move him to the left side. He can be your third pair right side guy sooner because there's going to be an opening. And then if someone like Gallagher is ready to, push in this camp where he's so far and above some of these other guys, is he ready to push for the number 1 spot in Providence? Could he even push for a 3 spot in Boston if you're trying to make that youth movement kind of happen? So there's some opportunity there. It's just going to be interesting. And then, of course, seeing where the goaltending is at, that's always going to be interesting too. Dom also adds in that hockey players at St. Andrews train more than NCAA players. So, the NCAA training schedule also would have affected Dean Letourneau's development as well. Dom, hopefully everybody is doing well on your end.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gooch says, will you plan to do a final mock draft or trades during the draft? Oh, we haven't even touched upon the draft yet. What do you say we dive into the draft?
Sure.
Okay. My overarching thought when it comes to the draft is I've been trying to take more of a, first of all, you have to, where the Bruins are specifically, you don't really get a choice as to who you draft.
Right.
If you're looking at it in terms of the top 7 or 8, 9 guys, you're not really choosing your player. Everyone ahead of you is choosing theirs, and you're getting what's left.
Right.
Now, some would say that that's probably a good thing because Don Sweeney can't draft. Okay. I'm just pulling up McKean's top 32 list here. That's the list that I've been kind of going off of. I think everybody's familiar with the top names. Is there one name that you're circling going, that's the one I want for Boston?
Honestly, Higgins.
Yeah. For me, I would have to say the guy that I would circle would probably be Denoyer. Higgins, the size does worry me a little bit. I think he might project out more as a 2C because of it. I mean, again, when you look at Schaefer, Misa, Martone, Denoyer, Higgins, Frondell, Eklund, like Brady Martin, Jake O'Brien, Roger McQueen, there's your 7 guys right there that, you're talking your top 7 picks. You're going to get what's left if one of those guys is your guy. How do you feel about the Bruins trading this pick?
It depends on what they get. Like, I don't want them to trade it. I don't want them. Like, I read I don't know if it was Daily Faceoff or someone that Calgary wanted to trade to get into the top 10 and they could see the Bruins trading out of it. And I'm like, why? Like, what are they going to get?
Well, I'm going to shout out Brett Howard on this one, too, because I saw some tweets that he was going back and forth on that. Dom says Jake O'Brien, by the way, which I don't hate the pick. I'll put it this way. If they end up with any of those names I just mentioned, I don't hate the pick. I really don't hate. There's not much for me to hate in any of those players. It's just a matter of how does the player end up developing at that point. If you're going to move on from the 7th overall pick, like you said, what you get in return is crucial. Calgary would make sense if you are targeting Rasmus Andersson in the deal. They have, I think it's 13 and 19 overall, or 13 and 31 or something, 19 and 31 or something like that. They have a pick in the teens and 31 overall in the draft. So, like, I mean, would you target a right shot defenseman to bolster your top 4 like that? I wouldn't hate that move. He's got to come with an extension. And Rasmus Andersson has the same agent as Hampus Lindholm, who you acquired in the exact same kind of manner. So I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't like giving up 7 overall, but
I
what's
think
the rest of the cost?
I think that's part of it because the Bruins, outside of 21, right? Was that when they drafted Lysell?
Yeah, I think so.
That was the last time they had a first round pick. You know what I mean? So it's hard because this draft class is not a light your hair on fire draft class.
That's what I mean. So unless you're gonna get the guy that you want,
right. But the other thing is too is that this is where Bruins fans, and Dom, you can back me up on this because Chris, I know you will. But Bruins fans don't understand that whether they keep the 7th pick or they trade it away for a current NHL, the only way, if they trade it away for a current NHL player, that is the only way that 7th pick is going to be on a roster this year.
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean?
There is no one in this draft, save for maybe Matthew Schaefer, and that's a maybe. No one in this draft is a 90% chance or higher being on an NHL roster in year one. Right. Now, someone could surprise. I mean, we've seen Brandon Carlo do it. It's not impossible, but it's also one of those things where I'm not sure that using the pick is the right move. You know, most of these guys are going to be 2 or 3 year projects. If you're Don Sweeney, you're also looking at this going, I might not be here when this player makes it to the AHL, let alone the NHL.
Right.
So, again, depending on what you're getting in return, if you're getting, like we talked about Jason Robertson a few weeks back, now that's kind of been quashed by Dallas. They've made a few moves to be able to keep him. But, you know, I know New York has come up, you know, where they want to get Higgins and they want to get Schaefer number 1 overall. I don't see moving up making sense.
No.
It just doesn't. It's going to cost more to move up, and it doesn't make sense. There's no one
to light a fire on me that makes me want to move up. It's not like there's no one that's going, I need them on my roster. No.
Right. Now, I'm not going to complain if, like I said, I won't hate any of those picks. Now, if you tell me that Denoye is your guy and you've scouted him and you know him this way and that way and whatever, and you're like, he's the one we want to have, and you know he's going to get taken at 4 by Utah, and you want to find a way to get ahead to 3 with Chicago so you can get him, I will sit there and say, what's the cost going to be to do that? I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying don't be stupid about it.
Right, but what do you like? So what do you give up to get to 3?
That's my point. Like you're looking at, to get to 3, you're looking at probably at least 7 in Poitras.
Right, and why would you give up Poitras for Denoye?
Exactly. I don't. It doesn't make sense. Why would you give up Matthew Poitras for Denoye, Higgins, Frondell, Brady Martin, Jake O'Brien, Roger McQueen, unless you really like them that much more?
And you think that Poitras is at a level that he just doesn't fit your system?
Which, you know, did you see him in Providence last year? Because last time I checked,
that's what I'm saying.
Like system you run in the NHL.
You're not if you're giving up Poitras, you're giving up Poitras for an NHL ready player that's already producing. That's going to put you over the top. You're not giving him up for a prospect that you have no idea what their upside is when you know what Poitras's upside is.
And I know, again, the Islanders have been thrown around. Noah Dobson's name has been thrown around. I think, because Noah Dobson is the popular name, but I think the guy they're looking at in New York, if they put the 7th overall on the table, you'd be looking at probably also including a guy like Poitras, maybe even Lysell, a combination of a few other things. I think the guy they'd be targeting would be Matt Barzal. Because if you're the New York Islanders and you're going after James Higgins and Matthew Schaefer, you're trying to get younger. Barzal does not fit your timeline anymore. So Bob asks, would you give up Lysell in the 7th for Denoye? No. Lysell could be in the NHL this year.
Yeah, Lysell, I think, is really, barring a huge unrestricted free agent signing, Lysell is in your top 6 this year.
I know people talk about this as like a 2-year thing, like they're aiming for the playoffs in 2 years, but that's not an option. This team is going to do what they can to push in for this year. Now, I do think you're going to see a youth movement, guy like Fabian Lysell, as Sweeney said in the press conference today, those guys who got time in the NHL last year have a legit shot to make the team. So let's review who those guys were. You're talking Poitras saw some time. The Fraser Minton saw some time. Then at the end of the year, you saw. I would consider Wahlstrom having had some time, considering what happened with him before he got waived. Merkulov got some time.
Merkulov got like 2 games.
He still got the call up. Who else am I forgetting here? Riley Duran, Husnadinov. I mean, you've got a lot.
Yeah,
I got a lot of repetition in there.
Out of all those names, I don't see Riley cracking the lineup unless for some reason they don't come to terms with Beecher or they don't, you know what I mean? And then he's on your fourth line. I don't see him pushing ahead of Lysell. I don't see him pushing ahead of Husadinov. I don't see him pushing, you know what I mean? There's other prospects, Fraser Minton, I don't see him pushing ahead of him. So I think the only way Riley Duran cracks the lineup this year is if you move on from Beecher.
Yeah, I certainly don't think he's a favorite.
Right. Well, I think unless you move on from Beecher, Cole Koepke, like those type of players, that aren't going to be in your top 6. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and knowing the injury that he had last year, John Beecher, I'd be okay with bringing him back. Obviously, you have him for a couple more years under control. You can give him a qualifying offer and kind of kick the can down the road a little bit. I do want to pull up Bob's comment. He says Merck is done here. I'm not sure about that. There is an opening now for Merkulov to push. I'm just not sure he wants to stay.
Bob. I agree with Bob.
I mean, he's got a left wing potential. I'm okay with moving on from him, though.
The reason why I think he's done here is I think that they really there's other players in front of him that, and I don't think he got the right shot.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think he got the right shot, especially last year. He should have gotten the same shot the amount of time that Lysell got. You know what I mean? I truly think that he should have gotten that shot. He didn't get that shot, though. And I don't think that they're not doing them any favors, and he's not doing, neither one of them. For him to sit in Providence, he deserves to go somewhere to be able to crack that lineup. You know what I mean? And get that time and see what he could do. I just don't see him cracking. I don't see him pushing anyone out of the Boston lineup. I could see Lysell pushing a couple of people, out of the Boston lineup.
Yeah,
especially under a Marco Sturm. I think you're going to see Lysell be a much different player under a Marco Sturm than you saw under Joe Sacco.
Yeah, and I think Merkulov, because you maintain his rights and whatnot, I think he's someone that you could include in a deal to bolster the value of something because you have his RFA rights and you only have to do a qualifying offer on him.
Right.
I think he's someone that come draft day on Friday, if you're talking to a team like New York, Calgary, Edmonton, Philadelphia even, Philadelphia just has a lot of Russians. He may have some interest in playing with some fellow countrymen. Like he's the kind of player that on draft day, when you're sitting there with a without a third round pick and you go, holy crap, this player fell through the second round. Who can we trade to get a third round pick so we can select this player who we have higher on our board than most and we want him? Hey, you call up Philly, we'll give you Merkulov to get the next pick on the board. Okay. That's one of the things that you would keep him for.
Right.
Let's see. Bob says too many centers, shift to left wing in the top 9, no room for Merkulov. This team just has a lot of left shot centermen who also play the left wing. They need some who can play the right side.
Mm-hmm.
So that, it's tough. Dom says sleeper Merck to Tampa. That would be an interesting move for both sides. I wouldn't hate that if I'm Tampa Bay though, because putting him in on that third line.
Well, especially because they're getting older and they need some of that youth.
Yeah.
To help push along, you know what I mean? To help get them back to where.
And I know everybody immediately goes, yup, right there, Bob. Part of an Isaac Howard deal. Would you take a chance in trading for Isaac Howard?
Depends on what you have to give up for him. That's the whole thing.
I'll put it this way.
I want to know,
what am I giving up or less, I do it.
What?
If it costs me Merkulov or less, I would do it.
Right.
But if it's going to cost me my second round pick, either one of them, to me, that's too much. He wants to hit unrestricted free agency after his last NCAA season.
Right.
Now, again, we were just talking about all the reasons why Merkulov might not stick around long term anyway. The redundancy factor is a thing. Yes, they have spoken about Howard with Tampa. So I would do Georgia Merkulov to the right for the rights of Isaac Howard. I would do that if I'm either side. The question is can Tampa get a little bit more?
Right.
If you're another team, are you willing to pay a little bit more?
I think it depends on the team. You know what I mean? Like there's certain teams that aren't going to. They're going to be a little bit more reserved to like the Bruins, and then there's going to be other teams that are like they have nothing to lose.
And a team like the Bruins, if you bring Isaac Howard in to have the rights to him, you have a different sales pitch than if you are, say, the San Jose Sharks.
Correct.
Than if you're Seattle. I'm trying to think of, if you're Utah, if you're the Boston Bruins, you get to sit there. I know people make fun of Don Sweeney for having the comment about, I'll let you know when a coach doesn't want to coach the Boston Bruins, but he's also not wrong. You can look at Isaac Howard and say, we're an original six franchise. We push for the playoffs every single season. We have a legitimate shot for you to make the Boston Bruins at the NHL level. Worst case scenario, you go to Providence and help and develop there, and then you go in. What would be the compensatory pick, Dom? If there's a compensatory pick, then that would be the minimum it's going to take. And I would certainly say you have to start there. If you know what the compensatory pick would look like, then that definitely would be helpful. But, it cost you Ryan Mast and a sixth for Soderstrom. So we're seeing a lot of weird movement. Granlund to Seattle. Was it? No, not Granlund. What's his name from Dallas there? Got moved for a couple picks. At the bottom of the second round. Okay, so a second round pick. We'd have to look and see what would be the second round pick comp if you're giving up the rights to Merkulov as well. But I would explore it, Dom. That's the point. And like you said, the weakness of this draft plays a huge factor for me, because no one in this draft is going to be in the NHL next year right off the bat that you can say surefire will be in the NHL. So you look like you're intensely researching something.
No, I'm just looking at I'm just looking at Howard's stats and stuff.
Solid
you. Yeah, and it's a matter of whether or not they have until August of next year.
Right. Let me see because you have 2 firsts next year. So yeah, you'd be looking at a minimum of a second round pick based on what Dom is saying with the compensatory pick.
Right.
So if you're looking at, you have what picks this year? You have Carolina and St. Louis, which, oh, by the way, St. Louis now apparently has Jordan Kyrou on the trade table. I'd give up the 7th overall pick for that. I'd have that conversation. Where is the second rounder that they have? St. Louis at 51 and Carolina at 61. I'd give up one of those plus the rights to Merkulov.
But the problem is that he has come right out and said, Isaac Howard has come right out and said, I'm not signing with a team that I don't fit with. So I think you have to have they have to give you, you know what I mean? You have to have those conversations. Are you giving up something and then having him say, no, I don't want to be here? You know what I mean? So I think that's because that's the whole part of it. He doesn't want to be in Tampa. He doesn't think it's the right fit for him. So I think you have to have those conversations, because if not, if you're giving up something for a kid that's not going to sign here,
right now,
then why are you giving up draft capital?
Now there are other options with Tampa because they're so cap strapped. You might be able to get someone like an Oliver Bjorkstrand if they're trying to dump cap money. Now, obviously, that wouldn't be 1-for-1, but if you're including Merkulov in a deal, you're including maybe a second round draft pick and something from next year's draft.
Well,
maybe that becomes an option.
So the other thing is too is that people forget is that Sweeney could be saying, all right, listen, he doesn't want to sign here. He wants to sign in New York. Say he wants to be a Ranger, right? I'm just throwing out a team.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right. Say he wants to be a Ranger.
So who doesn't want to be a New York Ranger?
So the Bruins could still say, all right, we're going to give you Merkulov in this. And then they get the rights to Howard plus a player. Then they trade the rights to Howard to New York and get, you know what I mean? So it doesn't have to be 1-for-1. It could be a 3-team deal. It could be a 4-team deal. We've seen that happen. We've seen Sweeney pull off stuff like that. We don't know. The bottom line is, though, is that if anyone thinks that Sweeney's going to make a move that doesn't have the Bruins' best interest, that's.
Can I also mention the New York Islanders? If you're going with Matthew Schaefer, you're going with if you're trying to get James Higgins, how would you feel about trying to have Higgins and Howard down the middle in the near future?
Right.
Maybe if you're Boston, you can facilitate something like that because you have that valuable number 7 overall pick. The problem that you have right now is there's no guarantee Higgins is there at 7. It'd be a lot nicer. You'd be in a lot better position if you were, say, Utah.
Right.
Higgins would likely be there at 4. So I do think there are some options on the table pre-draft, but we're not going to see any of them come to fruition until you're on the clock.
Right.
The most valuable time for you to pull the trigger on a deal is when you are on the clock and you have the leverage of saying, okay, New York, you really want him. We can figure the deal out later if we need to hammer out a few more details, but we will draft him so we can work on the trade.
Right.
But at the same time, if another team really wants Higgins, you can now leverage that team's desire to trade into 7 and your option to trade back and say, listen, New York, Philly is offering us this and this to move back in the draft. So we pull the trigger now, you get your guy. We pull the trigger on this, you still don't get him. So there's value in the negotiation part there. Right. So I don't see anything. And obviously, he was working on the extensions. You've got a few extensions to worry about. That's kind of, I do think there was a quote that Sweeney had mentioned today, actually. It was, there was a comment about still expecting movement, but he's comfortable picking at 7. Keeping an eye toward the future, but also now. And I think it was a combination thereof. I wasn't able to watch the whole thing. I'm just looking at some of what Ian Steele had tweeted out, the guy from Providence.
I'm looking.
But I really wouldn't be surprised if there are, 2, 3, or 4 options on the table for Don Sweeney come draft day to move the pick, whether it be for a player now or to move back in the draft and get something as well.
Are you talking about what the scouts are looking for?
The only thing that I have that he sent out was that Sweeney says the Bruins are comfortable picking at number 7 overall, but still expects movement in trades throughout the NHL. But I do think he's referring to what he has available. But there was a quote that Steele put out that said Don Sweeney, quoting him, said, "We're taking the best player." So I guess the question becomes, if he says we're taking the best player, do you think that means they have no plans to trade the pick?
Hold, please.
I know you're searching through the whole thing.
I am.
I think it's a similar.
Ultimately, we're going to use all the opportunities that present to explore what will improve us now moving forward. As I said, I think we have to have an eye towards what we're capable of doing this year and in the upcoming years. In conjunction with that, with the draft and building around that. That was our philosophy at the deadline, and realizing we had to take a step back. We're going to get back into a competitive mindset with an eye towards growing towards the future. And that's what we just had to do. As I said before, I don't think we can be stuck at neutral. So that's not the quote. Yes, we're taking the best player. Ultimately, players played on the wing. One young man in the top part of the draft played primarily on the wing in a pro league this year. So is he a center down the road? Yes. But you also have players that are currently in the National Hockey League that were earmarked as centers that are really effective wingers as well in creating from the wing. I don't think it's just a married position to the player. They just start out one way and move into the middle of the ice like a lot of players do. It's hard to just be a winger and then decide you're going to be a center later on. Ultimately, I think the centers carry a lot of weight in that regard. And some players are adamant, no, I am a center. I am just a center. But there are players that really don't care. They consider themselves top 6 players or top line players, and that's where they want to play and play with the best players they possibly can. That was the uncommitting to drafting the best player.
Yeah, Dom mentioned that it was obviously, I know it's all relevant, and I don't know what the question was that was asked. That's why I was hoping you could find it in the transcript, because
well that was on how he that was on committing to drafting the best player. The other one was
so what that tells me is if they have not dealt the pick, they're just going to take the best player available.
And he said on how he feels the draft board will play out. Outside of your own list, I don't think you have any. I mean, people will ask the questions, but sometimes people are misleading. Sometimes people are truthful. In the day, you can only control your own draft board. So we have to react in terms of what other teams are likely to take. You can look at other teams' depth charts and somewhat figure out what they might target, but everybody's looking for the best player. You're picking at the top part of the draft. You need what you think who is the best player to impact your own club.
Right. And I think that's the exact right answer, on par with what we're seeing with all of I've seen 100 different mock drafts and 100 different rankings, and I've seen, each one different. One mock draft, I mean, pretty much the only thing that's consistent is Schaefer Misa 1 and 2.
Yeah. He
And
expects some
even then,
movement,
we're
but
now
he's not
hearing
given he expects some movement in terms of the draft, but he's not but he said there's going to be jockeying on teams that are trying to move up, teams that are willing to slide back,
yeah,
but he's not being specific.
even now, I mean, we're hearing some last minute stuff, I'll call it, about Misa not being the second overall pick. Like,
Right.
this is the time where people are going to lie their ass off. And that's why I'm sitting here, with Don Sweeney going, if they have their draft pick, they will pick best player available.
This is a good one on the team's assets entering the next season. And he said, well, again, we have draft capital that we haven't had in the past. We're perfectly happy making selections, but we're going to continue to see what the marketplace might bear, and whether that's players or move back, move up scenarios. I think we're well positioned to be able to explore those. Years past, we haven't been. I think we've got a core group of guys that, when healthy, are going to put us right back in a competitive mindset. And now we have to do a good job to surround that or grow it. There's going to be opportunity for players to take the next step. We've got Marco Sturm, it says Marco Sturm has done a good job connecting with every player and getting to understand that they need to come in ready. There'll be an opportunity, whether the youngest player that tries to crack our roster, but you're not going to be handed anything. That's the messaging. But we feel really good about the sort of group of players that we have now. We have to do a good job surrounding them.
Yeah. So
what his strategy is different this year. Again, and I'm sorry I'm being long-winded, but this is
no,
all
I appreciate you reading it off, because they didn't
yeah.
televise this, so
yeah.
Most people haven't caught the details of it.
He said we're picking at a much more elevated position, so we're actually aware of those players that are there versus moving back, moving up, what the acquisition costs versus the move back, and who those players might be. If you do that, the player you might be passing up on. So that's the other thing. Like, you could be passing up on a player. So it's different. We haven't done it for a number of years. Envious of teams who have had the opportunity. Now we're in a good situation to try and do that. I think you have to treat it a little differently. So they're looking at this draft a lot different because, again, they have a first round pick and they have lower second round picks.
It's not even a first round pick. They have a top 10 pick.
Right.
And that's where some of the bigger value is. And I think if you look through and kind of look at the way he answered the questions, there's a lot of, we have options. We know what most of those options are. We have to make some decisions, but it's also not entirely up to us because we have to see how the draft board plays out.
Right.
Just because if you're the New York Islanders, you're the one who's not pulling the trigger on, and I'll just use this as an example, 7 for Dobson. You're not pulling the trigger on that unless you know you're getting Hagens at 7.
Right.
Unless you know you're getting the 2 players that you want, you're not pulling the trigger on that.
Right.
And so there could be 3 or 4 different options just with the New York Islanders on the table, depending on who's fallen. Because just because they may want Hagens, they may also have interest in, Jake O'Brien. They may have interest in Caleb Denoyer and go, we want a center on top of our defenseman.
Right.
And we're willing to move, the rights to Dobson and, whatever it is, But is it going to be a first round pick? Is it going to be a second round pick? Is it going to be, this prospect, that player, that kind of thing? It just, you got to get there. And that's why I'm pumped for Friday. I can't wait to see how it all unfolds. The reaction is going to be hilarious. No matter what Don Sweeney does, it's going to be wrong.
Right.
So let's all remember that. Don Sweeney won't do the right thing no matter what. Although I will say I think people should have a little bit more confidence given the fact that he has made some of the moves that he's made. The Soderstrom trade and signing Mason Lohrei to the deal that he's gotten. Like, he's proving that he's good at the job. He may not be perfect.
You make it sound like he hasn't been doing a good job. Like, I know that people are still upset.
Well, based on how people talk about him, he sucks as a GM and should have been fired 10 years ago and never should have been hired in the first place. It's like, come on.
It's like, it doesn't matter. He doesn't get credit for, bringing back Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci for that one season. He doesn't get credit for signing David Pastrnak. He doesn't get credit because, as far as people are concerned, David Pastrnak is a waste of money. Charlie McAvoy doesn't deserve his
Pastrnak turns the puck over, so we got to trade him.
But Charlie McAvoy doesn't deserve his contract because he's the worst defenseman in the league. It's there, and I think we see more of the negative comments than we do the positive comments because the negative comments are louder. You know what I mean? And I think that people in Boston, and I'm not one of them, but do I want another championship? 100%, but I'm not spoiled. You know what I mean? But the fact that because the Patriots won 6, the Red Sox, 2004, 2007, 2013, 2018, you know what I mean? The Celtics, they want another championship, and I get that. But when you have a competitive team, and I understand that making the playoffs is just not enough, but every single team that makes those playoffs has the opportunity. The Bruins weren't supposed to win in 2011. The Kings weren't supposed to win in 2012. You know what I mean? Like, the Kings were the 8th seed. It wasn't like they were. It wasn't like they were the President's Trophy winner. They were the 8th seed. Florida wasn't supposed to win last year. You know what I mean? Like, the fact that people don't. What did he say?
He said, who does a great job? The guy that created the click because of the Islanders Bruins trade. It's clickbait.
Yeah.
It's clickbait, and that's one of those things where, having done the show with Dom for as long as I have, and with you, and I don't put things like I think you and I had the conversation about Jason Robertson, and I was hesitant to put his name out there, if you remember, and because I immediately followed up with I don't know if he'd be available. Well, then 2 weeks later, we started seeing Jason Robertson everywhere.
Right.
I'm not putting the name out there because I'm hearing things. Like, I'm looking at, I put out a piece on Spencer Knight being someone to watch at this last trade deadline because I looked at the Florida Panthers cap situation and I said, he's their most tradable asset. Mm-hmm. They need to build for this year. They're going to look to build beyond. They were cap constrained. Before that deal, people forget just how little cap space they had. Mm-hmm. They pulled off the perfect trade with Spencer Knight. And because of that, they positioned themselves to get Brad Marchand at the trade deadline. They positioned themselves to get they had a decent backup goaltender that was able to help supplement Bobrovsky down the stretch. They didn't need perfect, and they were fine because of it. But he was an asset that they didn't have first-round picks. They didn't have second-round picks. They barely had third-round picks. Like, he was valuable.
Right.
And I'm not trying to sit here and say, oh, I'm right about all these things. I just looked at it and said, if I'm Florida and I'm trying to improve my team, what's the one piece that I'm looking at that's valuable that I can get something in return for? Logic dictated Spencer Knight. I don't know why I keep saying Spencer Martin.
I don't know either.
And so, like, I'm looking at, if I'm Vancouver, right, I'm looking at Thatcher Demko, and I'm shopping him around to any team that needs a goaltender, simply because Artur Shilov's just played his ass off in the Calder Cup final, in the entire playoff, honestly. Kid's goals against average was under 2, and he played in, almost an entire quarter season, 25 games or something like that. Seth Jones did come back in that Knight deal. There was also a draft pick as part of it, if I'm not mistaken. So that gave them a little bit of capital. I'd have to go back and look at the exact deal, but yes, that was the crux of it. Spencer Knight and Seth Jones. Which was crucial because Seth Jones played a part when Aaron Ekblad went down for the PED suspension. So, and now they have the ability to let Aaron Ekblad walk. It's being able to put fandom aside and say what makes sense. That's why I look at Jonas Korpisalo and I say, if I'm Boston, it does not make sense to move on from him unless certain things fall into place. You have to get an NHL caliber, Dom, because it opened up the ability to bring in Brad Marchand. And I go over it at another time, but it helped overall. And then, of course, having
the Blackhawks kept part of Jones's salary too. So when they got rid of Knight, when Jones came back, the Blackhawks they pay, I forget what portion of his salary that they paid, and they got a conditional draft pick for him too, first rounder.
Let's see. Yeah, so they have Seth Jones at I pulled up Florida. I got to pull up Chicago to see what they're retaining on it. I think they're retaining $4 million. 2.5. They retain 2.5. So the value of Spencer Knight, they were no longer paying $15 million for 2 guys when only one could play at a time. Essentially, they shifted the $4.5 million from Spencer Knight to their defense. That's how it improved their cap situation. Saving against the cap, I don't know how I worded it, but that's how it improved. You allocated the money differently, and that's what helped them overall when it came to winning the cup. As I mentioned, Thatcher Demko is someone that, Philly should have interest. Edmonton should have interest in.
Speaking of the cup, I just want to add, just because I want to say what a classy move Florida made after Barkov hoisted the cup, that every single player that it was their first championship got the cup first before any repeat players. I thought that was phenomenal. Yeah. I thought that was, because they could have gone, Barkov, Kachuk, they could have Bennett, Reinhart, they could have, but the fact that they went AJ Greer, Thomas Nosek, and given those players that had never won the cup the ability to hoist the cup first, was in a phenomenal. That to me was awesome. I just had to put that out there. Sorry.
And that type of organizational thought process, which obviously they've said the leaders of the team, Kachuk, Ekblad, Reinhart, Barkov, they had that discussion and said, this is what we're going to do if we win.
Yeah.
That philosophy, I think, holds a little bit more value in wanting to sign with the organization than no state tax.
Right. Well, and I'm sorry, I know people hate the Florida Panthers. Who doesn't want to play with Alexander Barkov?
I know. Right? Barkov, Tkachuk, Reinhart, Verhaeghe, like these guys are all signed long-term. Anton Lundell, they're all signed long-term.
Who doesn't want to, and love him or hate him, who doesn't want to play for Paul Maurice?
Yeah. Like,
he's changed so much.
That's the part of the organization where you go, that means more than 5.5% of your tax rate, because there are ways where, first of all, you're only talking about half of your games.
Right.
And second of all, there are other avenues to help save on the taxes and stuff if you get yourself a good accountant.
Right. So, but yeah, I just had to throw that out there because I just that to me was absolutely phenomenal. And I love the fact that Brad got it right after Bob as the, so when Barkov, all the first timers, Bob, and then Brad.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, you're louder now, actually.
Okay. Sorry about that. My one
okay.
AirPod died, and then they decided to just jump my computer over to my other set of headphones. So I was just like, okay, well, that's weird.
So, but moving back to the Bruins, I just had to, because you started talking about the Panthers so much, and and I just they're a well-built organization. The fans that hate Florida are the same fans that hate Boston. You know what I mean? Good night, Tom. Thank you for joining us as always.
Hopefully we can have him guest on a show for a little bit coming down the road. I know he's got a lot going on. So, Dom, we continue to wish you the best and look forward to the rest of your work as it continues. So we will talk with you soon. It's just I think people look at the Panthers and go, well, they've been to 3 straight. Tampa went to 3 straight. So how hard can it be?
No, but what I'm saying is the people that hate the Panthers are the people that hate the Bruins. You know what I mean? Because they're built the same way. They're built the same way, but Florida did it better the past few seasons. People that they're not the same people that hate Toronto. You know what I mean? The people that hate Florida for different reasons than and you can say it even like you can equate it to baseball, basketball, and football. The people that hates like the Patriots don't hate the Patriots because they're good. They hate the Patriots because they're from New England and they dominated for so many years. You know what I mean? But if you look at that Florida team, yeah, there are certain players that you could be like, oh man, but you want those players on your team. You can't tell me that there's not one Boston fan out there that wouldn't take Sam Bennett in a heartbeat. He is Brad Marchand.
Oh yeah, 100%. I also want to point out though, talking about them going to 3 straight, right? If you look at Florida going to 3 straight, and then you look at Boston over the last 10 years, Florida's gotten so much more luck on their side. If you look at, so Barkov, Tkachuk was injured this year, 100%. At the Four Nations, but they were able to LTIR him for the second half of the entire season.
Right.
But Barkov, Tkachuk, Reinhart, Verhaeghe, Lundell, Luostarinen, and then on the back end, Kulikov, Forsling, Ekblad, and Bobrovsky. How many players did I just name? 12 of them?
Yeah, I think so.
Call it 12 of them. They have all been there for all 3 runs. Every single one has had a decent contract during that time frame, and none of them, save for Tkachuk this year, none of them have had significant injuries to the tune of ending a career.
Right.
Think about how Boston would have continued to go had Nathan Horton not got hurt, had Rick Nash not gotten hurt, had had Milan Lucic been able to continue his play. What?
Don't mention him.
I meant in the 2011, 12, 13 timeframe, not the 3 years ago Milan Lucic who left the team after a week. But my point is Florida's had a lot more luck in that regard.
Yeah.
So Boston was, I think people forget, Boston was primed with Bergeron, Krejci, Rask, Charas, not Seidenberg, but they, they had Boychuk for a while. They had, Krug and these guys. They were all locked up to deals. And then you're talking about a career-ending injury to your second-line right wing in Nathan Horton. Okay, it takes you a little bit of time to replace him, and then you get a career-ending injury to Rick Nash, the guy that you replaced him with. Meanwhile, you have other guys who have their contracts coming up who, Torrey Krug didn't sign the same way Dmitry Kulikov signed. So
yeah, but I was okay. I know a lot of people love Krug. I was not one of them, so.
I know, but my point is
I hear what you're saying.
Not have the same luck that 100%. Florida has had in quote unquote keeping the gang together, if you will. Yeah. So, and I'm sorry.
No, and the thing is that the Bruins kept their core. And as players went out, new players would come in. Did they hit on all of them? No. David Backes was a miss, right?
He wasn't a miss at first.
Huh?
He was. Keep in mind, he wasn't a miss at first, and then he got that verticulitis stuff or whatever,
yeah,
and then everything went to shit.
He still wasn't. He wasn't the one that was going to put you over the top, though. You know what I mean?
No.
But like there was some hits and there were some misses, and that's the success that Don Sweeney doesn't get credit for. You know what I mean? Of keeping that team competitive enough that they could have, keep in mind, it was Don Sweeney, no one else, that put that historic team together.
Mm-hmm. And again, we'll talk about a little bit of luck, but the New York Rangers just got bailed out twice by the Anaheim Ducks in ways that Don Sweeney could only have dreamed about getting bailed out. Right. They just ditched off their Matt Bolesky. They just ditched off their Mike Riley problems that Don Sweeney didn't get help with. He had to ditch off first-round picks to do that.
Right.
And he still turned them into reasonably successful alternatives.
Right.
So, yeah, you can crush them for making the mistake, but no GM is perfect.
Right.
And, I have to say, I love the way the Ducks have been doing their rebuild. They have a crap ton of talent, and now you're going to see them start to make a lot more moves.
Yeah, my issue is the coach.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There was other coaches out there. Why him? Why him?
I know. And I'm not even going to try to change your mind on that.
No one can convince me that he deserved another shot. No one will ever convince me of that.
And I'm not even going to try because I don't disagree with you on that. I'm just purely talking about player personnel and what Pat Verbeek has done with the players.
Yeah.
It's quite a bit different than what we're seeing in Chicago. And, Chicago's getting to that point, but San Jose is at that point too.
Chicago, though, I mean, if you look at their roster, they have some key components, but they're missing a few components. You know what I mean? They have the leadership in Nick Foligno. They have the young superstar, although I'm not sure he's that much of a superstar. I'm still waiting for him to turn the NHL on its ear.
I think Bedard moves to the wing long term.
They gotta try it, but they have some things. The problem with Chicago is they waited too long.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They waited too long, and now they're trying to fix it, but they're going it's different. They're gonna be in that long rebuild when they should have been doing what the Bruins were doing.
I was just going to say, remember when Bruins fans were clamoring to see Chicago trade Taves and Kane?
Yeah.
Well, that's what the Bruins did last year. They traded their Kane and Taves value, which was Carlo, Coyle, and Marchand.
Right.
That's essentially what they did.
Right.
And then fans got upset because those guys left.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of people I think more people are upset about Marchand because of what he did in the postseason for Florida. I mean, he was in the conversation for the Conn Smythe.
He was also a third line winger.
He had right again, but also keep in mind what people forget is that when the trade was done, one, he was injured. They had no idea what he was going to be like once he came back. They didn't know what type of an impact. And Don Sweeney did right by him by sending him to a team that he wanted to go to.
Yep.
Unfortunately, because he was injured and his age, and the fact that he's a rental because he's a UFA,
hurt his value.
The Panthers held all the cards.
Because Don Sweeney got more respect from agents for taking care of the player than saying, F you, I'm trading you to Los Angeles where you don't want to go for what might have been a slightly better package.
Right.
And we don't even know how much better that was. You were not getting Quentin Byfield in that deal unless you were sending and for all we know, that package to LA was also contingent on, say, Brandon Carlo going with him.
Right.
And so because it fell through last minute, you now piece off Carlo, or Coyle could have been the guy. You piece off Carlo and now you piece off Marchand. And the only option that you have, because LA looked at it and said, we only want the two of them. We're not paying this price just for Marchand. We would take him to increase the value of what we're giving.
Sweeney was never going to do that to Marchand anyways. He was never going to do that to his captain. He was never going to sit there and say, screw you. You're going where I want you to go because I don't give a crap. Sweeney was never going to destroy Marchand like that. Never.
No. And
let's be honest. If the Bruins had traded him to LA, and the trade didn't work out, it would be even worse for Sweeney than the fact that they only got a first-round pick.
Absolutely. And that's a sell point, believe it or not, for a guy like Isaac Howard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you can sell him on, this is how we see you fitting in the organization, and then he goes, but what happens if that changes? Right. Well, look how we treated Brad Marchand out the door. We will help
but
you get where you're going.
Think Brad Marchand has a little bit more clout than Howard.
Absolutely. My point, though, is it's a sell point where you can say, look, our GM does right by the player.
Right.
He may scrap you for the $500K on the contract, but if something changes.
It's pretty well known across the league. Players that come here talk about what other players say about this organization. You know what I mean? There's nothing. It's not like it was in between Ray Bourque and Zdeno Chara. You know what I mean? Right. It's closer to Chara. It's not quite Chara because you don't have the same players. You know what I mean? But there's still a culture but if you look at that locker room, there's not very many players that are left that played with Bergeron, they played with Krejci, they played with Chara. So now it's on McAvoy, it's on Pasternak, it's on Hampus Lindholm, it's on Elias Lindholm, it's on Nikita Zadorov, it's on Morgan Geekie to bring that culture to where it's still that players want to come to Boston. You know what I mean? Because there was a time where players didn't want to come to Boston, and it was in between the Ray Bourque and Chara eras. It was literally in between those two eras that people are like, I don't want to go to Boston. It wasn't a original six franchise. I want to play in Boston. It was I don't want to be here.
Yeah, and they have a chance to turn all that around right now. So wrapping up, because I know it's getting late. I know we won't be live during the draft. just because there's a lot of draft content out there the day of, and there's a lot of what could happen and immediate reaction. Let's face it, we're all going to pull up the same elite prospect draft reports in the moment to see what they did. I think,
and half the time those reports don't mean crap.
Yeah, I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, but next Wednesday, after some of free agency has begun, will we look to do the same time?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're good to go every Wednesday going forward.
So
I definitely, because I couldn't do Tuesday, because we did want to do free agency, but that's the dinner for my mom's anniversary. Well, it's her birthday, but she's gone, so it's anyways. So we're definitely doing Wednesday the 2nd, which will give us hopefully a lot to talk about. Because hopefully there's some free agent signings, there's already some media availability, and we'll have all that stuff. I know that on Saturday, I'm not going into Boston. I could, but I can't. But I do have I'll have all the availabilities and stuff like that, though, because all the player availabilities are going to be done Zoom, because obviously the draft isn't taking place, and so.
Yeah, and I know, I'll be available all weekend. It's just, I think after us discussing it and what we're going to put out, I think recovering and doing a show on Wednesday, with some free agency to discuss, we'll be able to talk about it all. And then some other kind of housekeeping stuff. There will be some rebrand stuff coming, new show discussions, lots of changes, and it'll all be rolled out as we get closer to the July 1st timeframe. So obviously, Gayle, you and I will be sticking with What's Bruin here on Wednesdays at 7. I think with the exception of this week and next week during the off season, we'll probably not finalized yet, stick to an alternating week schedule, just because there's not as much. But we'll see. If something big happens, you'll hear from us.
But it also depends on, because next week too is the beginning of development camp. So we may want to do that next Wednesday just so we could do a recap of development camp, because I know you're going down. You're going down to watch, and so you may have some different insights that we can discuss. And
so, but follow along the What's Bruin channels. You can find myself on Twitter, as you can see right here, Gayle on Twitter, as you can see right over there. And we'll have a lot more coming, some of it more subtle than others, but everything has a lot of changes are coming, with a lot more content that I'll be part of and that we'll be putting out there. So thank you to everyone who's been tuning in. It's been a lot of fun. And yes, going forward, we will make sure that we have the YouTube comments turned on. There's a setting that defaults, and I always remember to go in and change that one. So my apologies, but you can always leave comments on YouTube for after. We will get those. And you can always leave the comments live on the show on our Twitter feeds as well. And Twitch we'll be dealing with that as well. So for now, we will see you all next week on Wednesday, and otherwise enjoy the draft.